fencing put around portions of the White House in preparation for protests and violence following the election. Many states have already put their National Guard troops on high alert and are ready to be called out at a moment's notice. And recently, Joe Biden authorized the use of lethal force by the military on American citizens. There's a difference between military and police. That's why we have the Posse Comitatus Act, to keep so that the military are not doing a policing job, because the job of a military person is to kill the enemy, not to police the enemy. A policeman's job is to bring peace. They are peace officers. A big difference between the two. They didn't even get the National Guard out there to save these poor people down in North Carolina following Hurricane Helene. It took them a couple of weeks to get people out there. Generals going on national public radio, stoking up fears, telling their listeners that they're expecting civil war in America as a result of the election if Donald Trump should win. And already there have been many attempts to assassinate the Republican candidate. The current administration has also made it clear that they consider those of us that support Donald Trump to be insurrectionists, anti-government extremists. In a word, the administration regards half the nation to be nothing more than garbage, deplorables, baskets of deplorables, as Hillary Clinton put it, and as Obama put it, bitter clingers to their religion and their guns. And following the trials of the Great Depression and World War II, America had gone on its knees to prayer. Following the Dust Bowl, they realized that God had answered our nation's prayer and had mercy on us. And as a nation, America turned towards God. Churches were filled to overflowing as almost every family attended worship services. Stores were closed on Sundays. Schools were closed on Sundays. Businesses were closed on Sundays. You didn't work on a Sunday, in honor of the Christian Sabbath and day of rest. And in 1954, the Pledge of Allegiance was revised under President Eisenhower, as Americans understood that our nation owed its unity and its gratitude to God alone. They understood that God is the foundation of this nation. This nation was built on the Christian faith. And we needed God for our nation to be preserved, for our nation to be united and have unity. And so the words, one nation under God. We're one nation under God. I had a junior high principal that always made a note of it in assembly when we said the Pledge of Allegiance. He said, don't anybody take a breath between one nation under God. There's no comma there. He said, it's one nation under God. It's a statement. And if we're not one nation under God, then we will be a divided nation. Because our unity was based, our culture is based, our laws are based on God's holy word, on Christian statutes and morals and precepts. But this unity didn't last too long. Atheists and Jews took God and the Bible and prayer to court. And case after case, God lost. Prayer and the Bible and Christianity were exhumed from the public schools. Then they were taken from the public square. Even manger scenes. Remember that Christmas is about Jesus Christ's birth. That's the reason, as they say, for the season. That's the reason for the holiday. And yet they said, Well, it's propagating religion to have in a public park a manger scene, and so the atheists, out of their due tolerance and love for all viewpoints, their love for diversity, they put up banners around manger scenes. And in the Washington Park, where they had beautiful oil paintings, in the town where I lived, Ottawa, Illinois, they had these 6-foot-tall oil paintings depicting various things about the life of Christ and his birth that were in Washington Park for decades and decades. It was the highlight of the town's celebration. And yet, the woman down from Madison, Ann Gaylor, I think her name is, with something against religion, atheists against religion or something like that, she went down there and demanded to be able to put a banner up across the whole park saying, Christ is a myth, religion is a myth, God is a myth. And they've done this in town after town. Many towns take crosses off their buildings, off their flags. Even towns that are named after Christian saints that have had these emblems from the very beginning. But this election is not about personalities. Look at what's happened since 1962 when Madeleine Murray O'Hair, she used her son Bill, who later became an evangelist for the Christian faith. They talk about Christians putting their religious beliefs on kids, and that's not right. But Madeleine Murray O'Hair and the liberals, the Democrats, took prayer out of the schools through lawsuits. And since prayer has been removed, I don't know if I was going to put that chart in the newsletter, but you can see, and I'm going to have to walk down and see it myself, each chart. You can see the first chart is violent crime up there, and it has skyrocketed and was steady all the way until prayer was taken out of the schools. And look at how it's shot up since. Violent crime. You know, back in those days, if you remember, those of you old enough, you didn't have to worry about locking your house. You didn't have to worry about leaving your car keys in the car. You didn't have to worry about walking down the street. You hardly had to worry about letting your kids run wherever they wanted to do in town. They could go anywhere and just be back when the street lights turn on or it gets dark, and then it's time to get back home. Violent crime is skyrocketing. Single-parent households. Here's prayer taken out of the schools, and look what's happened. Premarital sex. Skyrocketing. Birth rates for unwed girls. Prayer taken out of schools right there. Skyrockets. SAT scores are the only things that dropped precipitously. And ACT scores. I want to give credit to both of them, depending on which test you took. No one seems to put the connection there. Look how society changed once God was kicked out of the public square. God was kicked out of the public schools. And it affected that generation, my generation, the baby boomer generation. After they removed prayer from the schools, it was only a few weeks. And all of a sudden, America faced what is called the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I was a student in Chicago, Illinois, in Beaubien grade school. And we would have to do drills. We would climb a 6-foot ladder and have to jump and roll off that ladder. They'd have the whole school climbing up. A lot of the kids were crying and scared. They'd have to, so they would go and make them go all the way. Then you'd have to go down to the basement, and you'd have the sirens blaring, and frightening sirens, and you'd get down in that basement hallway, a dark, smelly basement hallway, and you would put your head between your knees, and that's going to protect you from a nuclear atomic bomb, they called them back then. It wasn't nuclear, it was always atomic bombs. We have atomic bombs in Cuba, Russia bringing them in. Cuban Missile Crisis. Just weeks after removing God from the schools are frightening the kids, and they think were under attack. No one seems to wonder if there was a connection between alienating God and the sudden threat of atomic war. And by 1968, a year later, a president was assassinated. By 1968, the baby boomer generation, the ones that were now being schooled without God, without the Bible, without prayer, they were now in full rebellion. They were turning against their elders, turning against their parents, turning against all authority. Dress codes in the schools fell. Now anything would go, and they tried to look as sloppy as they could back then, if you remember, and the hippies and the yippies and so forth. And they said, turn on, tune in, drop out. You remember Timothy Leary or Old Leary? I don't think it was Irish. I'm not going to say Old Leary because that sounds Irish. Timothy Leary, right? Yeah, good. I don't want to claim him an Irish heritage there. Hopefully he isn't. A PhD teaching students to drop acid, take drugs. And the drug culture swept through. You'd go everywhere back then and you'd see these psychedelic posters because that was all part of going on your trips for your LSD. And where they once had a corner on the Fox River Bridge where all the students used to go to smoke cigarettes before they got to the school. Now they were smoking marijuana and dope and getting involved in all kinds of other drugs, and things were falling apart. No one seemed to wonder if there could be a connection between taking God out of the schools and prayer out of the schools and Bible out of the schools, if there would be a connection between that and the drug scourge that then came violently across our land. There was what they called the generation gap. Don't trust anyone over 30. And I remember a movie that came out about that even. I remember the rock and roll going what they called metal rock or acid rock. And there were songs such as I Am the God of Hellfire. And they sing about fire. I'm going to watch you burn, watch you burn, watch you burn. You had musicians biting heads off of bats. You had them getting into every kind of satanic symbolism that they could, and was being inculcated into that baby boomer generation and defiling their hearts and their minds. And no one seemed to wonder why. How quickly America fell into violence as our cities erupted in flames in 1968, 1969, and cities were being burned down, and violence took the lives of Bobby Kennedy, took the lives of Martin Luther King and others. No one wondered. And then, I think it was Time magazine comes out with a cover. God is dead. And you have a rock and roll group saying, we're more popular than Jesus Christ. People wonder. They don't make the connection. God has certainly been removed from the public square and from people's lives. And along with that came the sexual revolution. Movies were sexualized. Playboy magazine came out, followed by one pornographic magazine after another. It used to be that you'd have to go into some dirty inner city place to find some kind of porn flick or some kind of a pornographic magazine. But then it became mainstream, and pretty soon you'd go down to a certain store in town, usually like a drugstore or something, and there on the shelf behind everything they'd have the porno magazines. Pretty soon you'd go to a gas station, they'd be all over at the entrances to gas stations and exits, all kinds of pornography being portrayed, and it got worse and worse and more disgusting, and now it's available to little kids as they're on their iPads, on their phones, right there in the home. All kinds of pornography, corrupting the hearts, corrupting the minds. And people don't put two and two together. Biblical and traditional family roles were now being seen as being oppressive to women. Oh yes, the man going out and working his full head off so that she can keep the house together and keep the kids and provide for the family and be a volunteer for civic organizations. Yes, that's very oppressive. To the woman or to the man, I would ask, who was being oppressed. And along with the free sex that came in the 60s and early 70s, came the need to get rid of that product of sexual activity, the baby. And so abortion needed to be legalized, and they took it to court. They didn't ask the American people. They didn't go to the states. They took it to the court to strike down all the state laws in Roe v. Wade in 1973, forbidding the killing of a child in the womb. Broken families, divorce skyrocketed. Broken families became a government problem and a government expense. But now, no one seems to still put two and two together, that we were once a nation built on God and especially on the Lord Jesus Christ. But now our government offices, they're kind of like, you look at the Biden administration today and it's like some kind of Benny Hill British comedy skit. People are given public offices. There we go. People are given public offices because of their sexual depravity. They're proud of it. They flaunt it. And the government has created laws to punish you if you don't embrace and accept their depraved ways. And America is quickly descending into hell, as the Bible predicts that the wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. Psalm 9:17. Do you know why they hate the founders of America? It's not because of slavery. I assure you that every black chieftain in Africa was involved in slavery back then. Every country, every little tribe in Africa was involved in enslaving black people and other people. The Muslim world was involved in the slave trade and taking them to all the corners of the world, and they still are involved in the slave trade. Africa is still involved in the slave trade and selling people. Many countries in Africa, nearly the whole continent. It isn't about slavery. It's about Jesus Christ. They hate the founders because of righteousness and because of Jesus Christ. Consider what George Washington said about the Lord. Because there's atheists out there that try to claim he wasn't a Christian. They'll claim anything. They lie. You see, people that are depraved don't have no problem lying. Washington said, "Oh, eternal and everlasting God, direct my thoughts, words, and work. Wash away my sins in the immaculate blood of the Lamb, and purge my heart by thy Holy Spirit. Daily frame me more and more in the likeness of thy Son, Jesus Christ, that living in thy fear and dying in thy favor, I may in thy appointed time obtain the resurrection of the justified unto eternal life. Bless, O Lord, the whole race of mankind, and let the world be filled with a knowledge of thee and of thy Son, Jesus Christ." John Adams. He said it's the duty of the clergy to accommodate their discourses, that's their sermons, if you want. You know, we think that the Bible always has to be dumbed down because Americans are getting dumber, so we always got to dumb the Bible down. Instead of keeping the Bible to be an elevated piece of artistic work that speaks of God in glorious prose and glorious language, giving respect, proper pronouns that nobody understands anymore. Oh, we don't want to use a proper pronoun like they, them, we, thou, thine. I tell you what, when I'm addressing God, it sounds so good in the Lord's Prayer to say, "Thine be the glory, thine be the power." O Lord, thou art worthy to receive honor and glory and praise. To have a Bible, a piece of work that elevates and strengthens rather than having to get it dumbed down to the people's level because the English language keeps descending down, down, down into the pit. People don't put two and two together. John Adams said it's the duty of the clergy to accommodate their sermons, their discourses to the times, to what's happening today. You preach on what's going on in your nation, in your government. To preach against such sins as are most prevalent. That's why so many sermons now in churches are on those issues of abortion and homosexuality, same-sex marriage, and transgenderism, and so forth. Because those are the prevalent push sins of our day. And he goes on to say, and to recommend such virtues as are most wanted. For example, if exorbitant ambition and venality are predominant, ought they not warn their hearers against those vices? If public spirit is much wanted, should they not inculcate that great virtue? If the rights and duties of Christian magistrates and subjects are disputed, should they not explain them? Show their nature, ends, limitations, and restrictions, how much soever it may gall Massachusetts. The government doesn't like it when you talk about what their rights are and what their rights are not, what they should do under God and what they should not do under God, how far their power should go and where it should stop, how their taxation is lawful or moral and how it's immoral and unlawful. But this election is not about personality. This election transcends people that are involved. It's not truly about the personality and the tweets of Donald Trump or Kamala Harris being a woman, whatever a woman is. We can't really define it, because we're not biologists. But if we were biologists, we could define it because biology doesn't define what a woman is. You get it? It's now a choice between good and evil. We're not voting for people here. We're voting over good. We're voting about evil, light and darkness, righteousness or wickedness. It's about your ability to follow your faith, your Christian religion, and walk with Jesus Christ without government intrusion into your church and into your family. It's about living without government intrusion in every aspect of your life, from cradle to grave. It's about freedom of speech, freedom of association, who you can associate with, who you can rent your house out to or not rent your house out to, who you can hire, who you can fire, who you can associate with and live with. Freedom of association, financial freedom. It's about protecting the Bill of Rights, which few Americans seem to know about anymore. It's about your freedom of religion, your freedom of speech, your right to keep and bear arms, as well as your right to a fair and speedy trial, and your right to privacy from the government against unreasonable searches and intrusions and seizures of your property. But let's talk about religion here since we're in church. Let's use the Ten Commandments then as a measuring stick as you go to the polls. First commandment we want to highlight is, here's the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not kill. The Democrat Party is the death cult party. Whether it's abortion or euthanasia, death and killing are their thing. They used to claim that they were the anti-war party, but now the mask is off. They intentionally provoked a war with the Russian bear, a war that has decimated the country and the people of the Ukraine, and they refused to go to the negotiation table. We always heard before that we need to have dialogue. We have to talk about the difficulties and the disagreements and come to an agreement. But no, now it's at the point of a bomb. They propped up Iran. They sent it billions of dollars in cash on pallets, which Iran then used to fund the enemies of Israel and America, encouraging surrounding nations to invade that little country of Israel. and drive the Jewish people into the sea. But the blood and the flesh of the most innocent, what Christ called the least of these, is the Holy Communion and the sacrament of the Democrat Party. They claim to be the party of equal rights, but they deny the right to life and believe that all women have the right to decide death. The same people that believe that children belong to the state and must be protected from the prejudices and the religious beliefs of the parents are the same ones who refuse protection for the most vulnerable, that child in the womb. They actually glory and rejoice in abortion. And when it comes to the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill, Christians must vote against that vile bloodshed and heartlessness that is the Democrat Party. The Republican candidate, on the other hand, kept his promise to rid our nation of that corrupt Supreme Court decision, Roe versus Wade, sending abortion law back to the states. Well, he is not what I would call by any means 100% pro-life. While he does not believe that God has given life at the moment of conception and it should be protected and all human life is sacred from the moment of conception, still the difference between him and the Democrat candidate on this issue is night and day. Thou shalt not kill, the eighth commandment. Exodus 20:15. Thou shalt not steal. 2020. Is that enough? And already the steal is on for 2024. Thousands of imitation ballots have already been discovered. Hundreds of ballots with differing names have been delivered to single addresses. Dominion voting machines are already rejecting Republican votes. Voting boxes in Republican-leaning areas are being set on fire. And I even saw a video of a ballot worker opening and ripping up ballots that were marked for Donald Trump. Is it really a surprise that the unmerciful pro-death party would lie, cheat, and steal as well? Jesus said the devil is a liar and a murderer, a cheater, a thief from the beginning, a thief. And what about taxation? To use taxation to rob citizens in order to fund foreign invaders, that's clearly in the realm of theft. Even the money earmarked for FEMA, meant for the rescue of American citizens during times of catastrophe, it was all used up bringing foreigners illegally across our border. There was little to nothing left for those in the devastated region of North Carolina. Inflation, brothers and sisters, is often, and is in this case, intentional. It is caused by the manipulation of supply and demand economics, by the availability of cash, among other factors. Inflation is a hidden tax, and an inflation rate of 20% over a 4-year term means that all government bonds lost money at several times the promised rate of return. How is that? You can make it, you can lower what you're going to have to pay back into negative amounts in the end, in the value of the money. So government bonds lost money at several times the promised rate of return, as they would be paid back with the deflated dollars in the end and be worth 1/5 of their value. Just imagine if a bank offered you a savings account that would pay 5% interest. You might be interested in bite on that. I looked up Royal Credit Union this morning. Royal Credit Union in Eau Claire thinks they're offering you an exceptional savings deal at 0.4% on your savings account. 0.4%. While the inflation in America, the deflation of your dollar is over 5% a year. You're losing 4% a year. Like put your dollars in that savings account. That's discouraging savings, which they don't need to do. That means that if you saved $100 4 years ago, you put it in Royal Credit Union, at the end of at this time now, you've gained 1.6%, or a whopping $1.60 over these 4 years. But the purchasing power of that $100 that you hid in the bank lost 20% in 4 years, or $20. Evidently, a penny saved is not a penny earned. Every $100 bill of your savings in that account lost a real value of $18.40 before you. What's the Democrat solution to inflation? Punish business owners and corporations, tax them and penalize them more because they're greedy. Even though it's these corporations that are funding the Democrat candidate. I don't know how people can be so stupid that they don't look at where the money's going and coming from. In other words, their solution is more government theft. More government theft will result in more inflation, brothers and sisters, not less. And it will drive investment money to foreign nations. It will drive it from our shores to where they can make more money. As Ross Perot, it'll send jobs away, as Ross Perot famously stated, that big sucking sound you hear is all the jobs going south. But worst of all, the Democrats want to steal your God-given right. Your parental rights are under attack. Your rights based on skin color. Your right to protection. The right to keep and bear arms. Your right to the fruit of your labor. Your right to practice your Christian beliefs without government interference. Your right to privacy. Your right to free speech without government censorship. Determining what's information and what's disinformation. Talking about right out of George Orwell's 1984, which I don't think is required reading in the schools anymore, but should be. It was when I was in school. And that was long before, that was over a decade before 1984. That was all futuristic fears. Now we're well past it. They want to steal your history. They want to steal your women's modesty. The Democrat Party is the party of death, taxes, and theft. Then the Ten Commandments tell us, thou shalt not commit adultery, Exodus 20:14. The Democrat Party is the fornication party, by the way. That's why fornicators rush to protect it with tenacity. Just about anything goes. It's too hard to keep taking children by CPS and then losing them and can't give account for them. And so Alex Jones brought it to the public's attention. They've become wise to CPS abuses. So they bring foreigners' children across the border by the millions, and they lose track of hundreds of thousands of them that we now know are being used for child slave labor, for the sex trade, even for snuff films. But they and their controlled media do not seem to care in the least. We have a president that openly sniffs children like their Thanksgiving dinner, laughs about encouraging children to rub his legs in the pools so they can watch the hair on his legs go up and down. What a perv. There seems to be no limit to the sexual depravity. They're the party that want to force their depravity, their sexual confusion on you. You have to use their pronouns. You have to address them the way they want. You have to hire all these degenerates. You have to rent your house. You can't discriminate against them if they're a sexual pervert. They want to force it on us, and they threaten to remove children from parents that contest such things. And there seems to be no limit to this sexual depravity that the Democrat Party will endorse. Even X-rated parties in the White House on Resurrection Sunday, while they should be celebrating the birth of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, they're celebrating the gods and goddesses of Eros. And they snub Jesus on the very day that commemorates his resurrection from the grave. The Democrats only get sexual morality and religion when they want to point the finger at a Republican candidate. The party of John Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe. The party of Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. You know, the non-judgmental party. That's their private lives. That's not any of your business. The non-judgmental, tolerant party loves to point their fingers at Donald Trump for his many marriages and his early Playboy lifestyle. But you know what? Donald Trump was one of them back then. He was a Democrat. They should celebrate it. He lived like a Democrat. Hollywood loved him back then. They showered him with television shows and money and movie appearances and fame and fortune. That was before he got religion. And the Bible says, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. The Democrat Party is a party of unjust weights and measures. The unequal justice system that's given rioters who burned down business and police precincts a blind eye, while treating grandmas waved into the Capitol by Capitol Police to peacefully walk into the Capitol of the United States to treat them, her, like a treasonous insurrectionist, as though she were Rambo, fitted with a suicide vest and carrying rocket launchers in an attempt to overthrow our democracy. Just look what they've done to Donald Trump. They used a pornographic movie whore as their poster child to make unproven accusations against Trump, whose attorney had paid the bribe for her silence during the campaign. Then she broke the agreement that she'd signed and gotten money for. And then she goes public with her accusations, and suddenly every check written to her during the campaign becomes a count against Donald Trump in the crime. That would smell, that sounds like a bad movie script. But it's true. Another woman, decades after the supposed assault, finally comes out of the woodwork to accuse Trump of molesting her in a public store. A fancy one at that. She never screamed for help. No one witnessed this supposed assault. She never reported it, even. But then she sues Trump in a Democrat stronghold that the media has already stoked up to hate him with a vengeance, where he cannot get up there, members, and she gets a huge financial award because Trump called her a liar and a kook in his own defense. Listen, unjust weights and measures. But not just Trump. Look what they did to Judge Roy Moore. Look what they did to Brett Kavanaugh and others. Even Clarence Thomas. Joe Biden led the assault against Clarence Thomas, a black man that was going to be put on the Supreme Court back then. They are the party of false accusations, and they're willing to go back decades to find mental rejects who are willing to vent their hatred and false accusations, and I'm sure they're getting lots of money out of it. Then the Bible says, thou shalt have no other God. Honor thy father and thy mother. I'll go to that one. I don't have it in the newsletter. Honor thy father and thy mother. Now, children are being taught by government schools to disregard what their parents say, to disregard their parents' religion, to disregard their parents' morality. They are able to change their sex if they want to. If they're a boy, they can go and have their body mutilated and parts cut off so that they can supposedly become a girl. You don't become a girl if you cut off the male genitalia. You become a male without your genitalia. It doesn't change you. Don't listen to your parents. Go and get an abortion without their approval. Your parents have no right to tell you who you can go out with, who you can hang out with. The only thing they tell parents to do is to have a talk with your children about the dangers of drugs. Huh? No. What you do is you tell your kids, you go and take drugs, you are grounded the rest of your life, kid. If we can't trust you, you're not going out. You won't see those people anymore. We'll put you in a private school if we have to, somewhere in Timbuktu. You don't have a dialogue. You tell them straight out, and they should know. Honor thy father and thy mother. You go to school board because you're concerned about your kids, and all of a sudden you're put on a terrorist watch list by the FBI, and they're investigating you, and they're turning up your house. They're not teaching kids to honor their parents. Thou shalt not covet, go to thou shalt have no other gods before me. At a recent Democrat rally for Harrison Lacrosse, 2 students shouted out, "Jesus is King and Jesus is Lord." What was Kamala's response? I know I don't do that very good. I'm not good at acting like a woman or a witch. She said, "You guys are at the wrong rally." Now people say, "Oh, she doesn't mean that they were at the wrong rally." Oh, yes, she is. Oh, yes, she did. God was taken off in 2008. He was taken off the platform for the Democrat Party, and they tried to put him back on a couple of times since then because they had all these ministers and people that are liberals and fake pseudo-Christians were saying, "Well, yeah, but you can't just take God out because it makes us look bad against Republicans. You got to keep him in, or we're going to lose people." Well, they tried to put God back in, but nobody's believing it. Nobody believes that the Democrat Party is a party of God, a party of righteousness, a party of goodness. Everybody believes, just about everybody, I think it's got to be 100% minus the ones that are just mentally incapable of doing math, of Democrats know that they stole the election in 2020. I think they know. I don't think there's any debate about that with them. I think they believe they're justified in whatever needs to be done to protect democracy, as they say, which means to protect the Democratic Party. The party voted to remove all mentions of God from their party platform. They worked to eradicate Jesus Christ from the lips of so-called Christian chaplains in the military, claiming that chaplains must represent all faiths and be non-sectarian. That's something that's irrational. It's something that's impossible to do. To represent all faiths, you represent none, except for secular humanism, which is the belief that human government is the highest power. And that there's no such thing then as absolute truth, but that all beliefs somehow are equally true, even if they're opposite. And besides the 10 Commandments, the Bible clearly teaches that there are only 2 genders, a male and a female, a man and a woman. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Not only is the Democrat Party sexually confused, but they insist that everybody be forced into reinforcing and accepting their insanity. They ruined the English language, adding ridiculous words that they claim are pronouns, and they're not. They insist that if we do not honor an individual's choice of pronoun or gender confusion, then we should lose our jobs. And we're liable to be charged with a hate crime. And what's worse, they use your tax dollars to confuse the most vulnerable, little children in schools. So the vote, my friends, my brothers and sisters in Christ, the vote is not about personalities. Our culture is at stake. Your Christian faith is at stake. Your families are at stake. And your freedom is at stake. This election is truly one of light versus darkness, good versus evil, and righteousness versus wickedness, and also nation against a corporate-run world government. We have a song before we go, the battle hymn